Wow, this is really encouraging. It looks like a choir up here. And oops. This is free from distractions is what I think is what Becca prayed. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. This is great. You know, we've been looking at God of surprises, our surprising God, all year long, and I don't think there's any place that God chooses to surprise us more than in our marriages and in our marriages. I think we've got some pictures of actually some weddings, and weddings are where we get these marriages started. I don't know if we know some of these people that. But some of these faces may look familiar to you. Some of them may not. But as we go on through, yes, there we go. And I think we've got... Now, does anybody know who this... They look like a couple kids getting married. Oh, okay. There's some flock E's or Ers there. That's and I think, oh, okay, I know those people. And finally, James and Debbie Edwards. How about that? So that's our. We'll have to do this again sometime. Pull out your old photos and try to remember what that's like. You know that sometimes we think like if a wedding comes off, it's a miracle, but it's even more of a miracle that we stay married after the wedding comes up. How many would say that's the case? It's, but the wedding was tough enough. But I think God loves to surprise us, and loves to surprise us in our weddings, and loves to surprise us in our marriages. And when Jesus is present, that's what it's all about. In fact, I think, although I sort of have this beef against weddings that seem like there's a lot of investment in the wedding, and there seems to be less investment in the marriage, I think nonetheless, I think start to finish, Jesus wants to be there. He wants to be there when weddings start, because I think it's a celebration of life itself. I think this is where Jesus is at. He says, gosh, I want to be there. I want to be there. And I want in one sense, in a marriage, I want a wedding to be kind of a foretaste of what every day is supposed to be like. Every day is supposed to be a day of celebration, a celebration of life, a celebration of your presence in a special way. And there's that saying that Jesus and it's repeated at weddings, what God has brought together, let no man put asunder. But I think that Satan loves to put asunder what God has put together. So there's things militating against marriages, and things that are militating against God's presence at any point in time in our lives. And in Jesus' day, weddings were really a big blowout affair. They were a thing that was a major celebration, started maybe years before with this contract that took place called a ketubah. There was a legal binding contract that might have taken place when people were they might have been children. But for sure, it was a legal contract was established before a couple ever got together, before they were actually consummated the marriage. And so we have this illustration in the book of Genesis about what was going on in an Old Testament sort of wedding situation. It says that Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So Jacob wants to marry Rachel. So he said, I will serve you for Rachel, for your younger I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. He's talking to Rachel's father, Jacob, and Laban. And Jacob's talking to Laban and says, I want to establish a legal contract so that I can have your daughter. This is we're gonna sign a covenant. This is something we can go to the courts with and say this is established. They were they were in fact married. I will serve you 7 years for your Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give you to her than I should give you to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. There's this contract that's established before they begin living together, before they begin the time of establishing a home together. So they're legally married, however. And this is the issue that took place when Jesus was born, before his birth. When Joseph and Mary came together, they were legally married. They had established a legal contract. And yet, because Mary was pregnant and Joseph knew it wasn't by her, he says, "Well, I really need to get a divorce." It wasn't that they were actually living together as man and wife, but they were legally, the marriage was legally consummated. It was legal, even though the marriage had not been sexually consummated. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. Now that's the first part of this marriage, this legal contract. Second part, apparently, was the actual time of consummation, and there was apparently a room that was built called a chuppah, kind of like a honeymoon suite, that was designed for the bride and the groom to get together, and they would have their honeymoon right there, and they had a bridal party that was all gathered when this took place. This is kind of a different sort of thing going on here, but apparently this is what would happen. And so when the marriage was consummated, then there was this great celebration, and they would march over to the groom's house, and there was a 7-day long feast. And so this is all part of the wedding. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal, and yet. When you have this kind of thing going on, you want to make sure that there's plenty of food and there's plenty of drink. This is what was going to make this party really special, because people were bringing all kinds of gifts, and they would say, "Hey, we're bringing the gifts for you, and we expect sort of this celebration to take place." And wine was a major part of this gathering, and so. As the couple got together, they're thinking, well, gosh, this is going to be this super huge celebration, and of course, wine was kind of a normative sort of drink, in this period is probably watered down to some extent. But Timothy tells us, don't drink only water. You ought to drink a little wine for the sake of your stomach, because you are sick so often. But wine, by and large, was the alternative anyways. It's you drink water, you drink wine, and wine was part of that festive occasion, and there's different kinds of wines, I'm sure some better than others. And we read that when Jesus was with his disciples, and he's going to visit his family. He's invited to this wedding, and he wants to show up and make this celebration really special. The wine has run out. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee, and Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." And you know, it could be that the most important thing that we can do in life is to spot those areas where things aren't quite right, and that we can't solve them ourselves, because it forces us into a situation where we're having to say, I need help from the outside. And the help that is most important for us to receive from the outside is help from God, is when we are forced to our knees and say, there's no human help that I can go to. There's no one else that can provide for me. I have to turn to Jesus. Jesus is the only one that can resolve this problem. I've got something that's really significant. Now, I think that this is so important when we can see in life that we can't make it fully on our own. We need something beyond ourselves. Remember when those 10 lepers were crying out, Lord, help us, Lord, help us. We're in great need. We can't solve this problem on our own. When they were healed, 9 of them just took off, but one returned to say, I recognize, Lord, it was without you that I was healed. You are the cause of my healing. Sometimes we go through life, and until there's this issue that stares us in the face, we're able to say, oh golly, I'm okay just the way I am. I'm doing just fine the way I am. Until we get to that point where we say, there's no help for me. I need God's help. God alone can resolve this. This is a situation. Mary turns to Jesus. Jesus, I need your help. She's seeing in Jesus something beyond just her son. She's seeing something of the Spirit of God at work. And she says, I need to turn to you. I'm turning to you right now. And Jesus replies, somewhat enigmatically, he replies, woman, why do you involve me? Here's this question that is raised. He doesn't say mom. He doesn't say mother. He says woman. I want to come back to that in just a minute, but I want to hang on. Woman, why do you involve me? And then he goes on to say, my hour has not yet come. Jesus believed to be a man of destiny. He saw himself as a man of destiny. He knew that God had something appointed for him, and he wasn't supposed to just pass through life with sort of kind of floating on through. He said, each hour is special. Each day is special. And I want to make sure that I'm living according to your plan, Father. And not just according to what other people are sort of dictating in my life. When Jesus, before he went to the cross, Jesus said, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. I have this special calling. Jesus understood that he was not just kind of passing through life, but God had appointed him for something special, and God has appointed each of us for something special as well. There is no just kind of passing through life. God has ordained that we are here this morning. He's ordained that Anne is surrounded by all these pink flamingos this morning. He's ordained that you are here to hear this message this morning, that you're here to hear from God this morning, that God is with you this morning. This is God's plan and purpose so that He might be glorified, but He has a special destiny for each one of us, a calling in our life. Not just to pass it through. And when Jesus, before he went to the cross, before he had as the Last Supper approaches, it says it was before the Passover festival, Jesus knew the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He was preparing himself for this final hour, his final calling, and he didn't want anything to dissuade him from what God was doing in his life. And then when he goes to the cross, his mother is one of the few people that's there at the cross and in support, being beside him. And it says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother. And when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, woman. Same phrase, same word, unusual word. Woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. And that may be a lot of meaning that's wrapped up in that phrase. Woman, here is your son. It could be that he's talking about Mary as sort of an Eve, sort of a second Eve. That here's this new way of looking at life. That you are now the cause of spiritual life to take place in the lives of many people because of what has happened in my life. And because you're accepting disciples such as John into your family. Woman, here is your son. It may be sort of a message of the church at large. The woman, you are the one that gathers in believers. You are the one that's saying to all other believers, come on in, come on in. And individually we need the gathering and and as a gathered body, we need individuals. We need one another. We need a disciple like John who loves Jesus. We need someone like Mary who's opening up her arms to people like John. We need one another. And this may be the statement that Jesus is making as he's on the cross. But for sure, this word woman, as Jesus is speaking to her at this wedding, has something more than just talking about, hey, I don't want to get involved in this wedding event. He's saying, I really want you to understand that something special is going on here. As you're speaking to me, I recognize that something is going on. Something spiritual is happening. I want to say something. A lot of times I think weddings, we lose sight of the fact that somehow God is invested in those wedding parties. That God is invested and He wants to be invested. Sometimes we think this basically just a photo op. It's just a time that we're sort of just celebrating at a level that just seems very, very human. God says, I want to raise that up. I want you to see something special going on. And I think Jesus wanted Mary to see something special going on. I think she did as well. She says, Jesus, I need your help. And then she turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you. Maybe one of the most important things that we can receive this morning is that message. When Jesus speaks, we're supposed to do what he tells us. The problem is we don't take time very often to listen to what Jesus has to say. I was talking to my sister, and I said, we're on vacation, and I said, Jesus says a lot of things that I don't really particularly like to hear. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, he says things like, go sell everything you possess and give it to the poor. And she said, well, he didn't mean for everybody to do that, did he? It just means for some people to sell. But it seems like I don't know anybody who sells everything they possess and gives to the poor. I don't know those people. And it's the people who don't want to do that, or it seems like the people he's speaking to. And I don't like Jesus messing with me in this way. I mean, it seems like, I can sort of sidetrack what he has to say and sort of push it off to the side. Well, that's for those other people. That's from Francis of Assisi. He's the one that listens to statements like that, but it's just not for me. When Jesus speaks, do I do what he says? I'm troubled with that. I'm troubled with a lot of things that Jesus says. And I think if I was a servant at this wedding, I'd be troubled with what Jesus had to say next. He said, nearby, it says, there were 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. That's a lot of water, I understand. I guess that would be big, right? That's 20 or 30 gallons. That's a big container. Jesus said to the servants, fill the water jars. Fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim, and then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. I have a question. Why didn't Jesus just say, if there's not enough wine, and he's going to turn water into wine, why didn't he just take the jugs that they were using for wine and just say, well, they're empty, bring me those and we'll fill them up? And why did he do it that way? What's wrong with Jesus? Jesus seems to want to do things that are disturbing. I could go on. I just feel, my sister was telling me about their church that has this event called Judgment House, and I was thinking about this, and they bring people in, and they kind of walk them through these events, which kind of shows you what your life will be like if you go to heaven, and it shows you what your life will be like if you go to hell. And it's kind of a sort of a graphic and Judgment House, and I imagine it's kind of a gripping sort of thing. And I said, the hard part about hell, and I was thinking about this, one of the hard parts about hell. So when Jesus talked about hell, he wasn't going out to those women on the street or tax collectors. He wasn't going to those people who were the scum of society and saying, unless you guys turn your life around, you're going to hell. Who is he talking to? He's talking to people like us, sitting in the church. He's saying, you guys, you're in danger of going to hell. He's saying, I don't like what Jesus has to say. The people who least think that they're going to hell are the ones he says are most likely to go to hell. Jesus, don't say that. I think it was reserved for those other bad people over there. But no, it's not. And I think a lot of times we become very satisfied in our own understanding of what it means to hear what Jesus has to say and just kind of pass off what he's doing as just kind of, well, this is just sort of what we've learned in Sunday school and church. We kind of say it's for other people instead of it's for me, the message is for me. He's speaking to me. But Jesus was trying to rattle people by taking those jars reserved for ceremonial washing and where Jews would say, well, wait a second, that's just for our kind of religious traditions. This is not supposed to be used for turning water into, that's not what you're supposed to do with this stuff. But they did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine, and he did not realize where it had come from, and though the servants who had drawn the water knew, and then he called the bridegroom aside, and everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you've saved the best till now, because Jesus had shown up in a surprising and unusual way. I wonder, even when we have communion, are we able to say, gosh, I sense Jesus here? Are we able to say, when we gather a time of worship, well, I sense Jesus here? But I think what Jesus is trying to say, can you sense Jesus at the foundation of your marriage? Can you sense Jesus here as you get together to celebrate? Can you sense Jesus here no matter what is taking place, what ordinary activities are going on in your life? You see, I think what Jesus wants us to do is to continually be broken free from the constraints of traditions, falling into ordinary ruts. I think Jesus, if he was here, would somehow shake us up. I have this feeling that we would be shaken up in some way. I keep on coming back to you, Ann. You look different somehow this morning. It's just gathering with all your friends. But I think you'd want to shake us up somehow and not say, hey, just come to church as usual and leave as usual. That's kind of what you're saying in your prayer, Becca. I don't think he wants us just to be the same. Somehow I think he wants us to say, I've heard from you and I'm doing what you're saying, Jesus. I'm hearing your message, but I'm not just the same. We have this awful tendency to get caught in some kind of rut that we've called a tradition, whatever it is. It's a rut, and some of us carry those ruts into our marriages, and those marriages are just ruts, and we're just entering into life that's kind of in a groove instead of open to the Spirit of God doing, saying, changing us, rearranging us, drinking and saying, gosh, something wonderful has taken place. There's real wine here, and it's the best wine. Jesus is here. He's broken free. He's broken through. He's broken free. Where's my youngest son? Is he floating around? There he is. You know what? When he was about 6 or 7, Wesley used to come to my house and wake up in the morning and say, I love life. That was his opening phrase. I love life. I think this is what Jesus wants to do. He wants to put wine in your grape juice. Wine in your grape juice. He wants to put wine in your orange juice. I guess this is what I want to say. Wine in your coffee. Maybe some of you do that already. I don't know. But he wants to put something that wakes you and say, wow, this is really good. My grandson, Ben, when we went to, he was about 6 or 7 when my oldest son got married, and when they got married, they had communion, and they had communion with grape juice and with wine. And when they were explaining which cup had the grape juice and which cup had the wine, when they made the explanation, they twisted them around. So here's my 7-year-old grandson coming on up, and he's going to the grape juice. Well, the grape juice isn't grape juice. And when he takes a drink, he goes down, and all of a sudden he goes like this. He says, that grape juice is burning. He says that this stuff is, he was mesmerized by something new that was taking place. Something was happening in his soul. This was going on, but I think this is what Jesus is trying to say. I want to shake you all up. I want to shake you out of what's going on. I want you to create your own wine. I want you to create something new. You know what? I think what Satan wants us to do, all of us, is to remain grapes. He wants us to remain grapes. You're a nice little grape. Stay a grape. And what Jesus wants to do is to crush grapes and turn them into wine. And that crushing process is rather painful and difficult. Jesus says you can't be a disciple unless you go to the cross, unless your grape is crushed. The grape has to be crushed. And you know, we spent a week together as a family all in one house. Guess what? There's some grapes that get crushed when the family all gets together, you know? Everybody's doing things differently. The greatest grape crusher there is, I mean, sometimes church should be a place where grapes get crushed. Where I've said this before, but if you have not been offended here in this church, if you've not been offended, you've not gotten close enough to the people of the church. Every one of you should be offended by somebody. Because it's what Jesus would have you do, is have your grape crushed. In some way, it should happen. But I think one of the greatest institutions that God ever created for crushing grapes is called marriage. How many of you would say, it crushes your grape? I mean, crush, man, boom. I had this nice grape going here. And guess what? When we're dating, we say, oh, that's a nice grape, and there's a nice, we've got a couple nice grapes going. We never, have you ever heard this? And we have never had an argument, you know? And then all of a sudden, boy, the grapes get crushed. And the idea is that when the grapes crush, wine is created. Something beautiful and wonderful is created. And what's interesting, Jesus didn't make just enough wine for enough. He didn't just make enough. He made an overflow of wine. I mean, you could not begin to drink all the wine that he created. I mean, there was just so much. I mean, it was kind of like, gosh, you know, it's like a buffet table. It's like going to teppanyakis with wine. You know, it's just it's so much. It's just too much. How much? It's because there's a statement I think he wanted to get across. I want you to become intoxicated on my love and joy. I want you to be filled to the very brim with all my goodness. I want you to have the very best. I want you to celebrate at the highest level. I want you to really enjoy life to the full. I want it. I want all this. Do not be drunk with wine, Paul says, but be filled with the Spirit. And that's what Jesus is saying as well. Be filled, be intoxicated on the Spirit. I want this to be taking place. And whenever you have a wedding, I want you to know that I want to be there. And every day of your marriage is to be a wedding feast. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was a first of the signs to which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him because they could see him showing up. They could see that he was really, really present. You know, at our gathering, we kept on coming back to the fact that my dad was no longer with us. He would always visit for a couple of days. The family would gather, and we'd always have a time where we'd ask Dad to share a few words of wisdom. So we had all the family member there, and Dad never turned down an opportunity to share a few words of wisdom. I just have you know, but he wasn't there, so it was kind of different this year, and we all knew something different would be there. But I was thinking about my mom and dad when they got married. It was right after the war. They had been through depression, both of them, and to the war and the scarcity of the wartime. You know, there were very few big weddings when this was going on. In fact, the wedding picture of my mom and dad, they're dressed in a suit, and the wedding party was just a few members of the family. I mean, that was the whole wedding. I mean, so the whole wedding is gathered. There's just a few people. They just had a small wedding because that's all they could afford. But what they did, instead of investing in a wedding, they invested very much in the marriage. There was a real marriage, you know, a real marriage where my brother remembers at times my mom getting so mad at my dad that she would take dishes and start throwing them. I mean, that was real. I mean, I remember my mom talking about how my dad would infuriate her. And I remember my dad talking about how my mom would infuriate him. And I heard those stories, and I saw some of those fights go on. But I also heard my mom and dad say that they were best of friends. That they were their best friends. And I remember my mom saying that as well. There's nothing I'd rather do than to spend time with your father. He's my best friend. It was a marriage where grapes had been crushed and wine was poured together. And I really believe in large measure why I'm here this morning is because they really had joy in their own relationship. And out of that joy, I'm kind of speaking. I'm sharing what's going on. But then my mom had Alzheimer's, and for about 6-7 years she declined to a point in the year 2000 that my dad wrote these words, and he called it perspective. He's 80 years old now. My mom's 78. And he says, she greets me with a happy smile twice a week when I visit, and my heart breaks. Does she know me or us? We go to the big room and sit next to each other. She clings to me and kisses me. We hold each other. Her eyes close at times. I ask, are you feeling okay? And she says yes. Do you have any children? And she says no. Any grandchildren? No. How are you feeling? Good. So many important things are happening to those she really loved and who still love her for what she meant to them and for all that she did for them with deep love. I cannot say Tom's getting remarried or Meredith is back in college or we're going to get a lot of upcoming visits. And I think what I would give to relive even the worst day together we ever had so we could, for a while, touch each other's minds as they used to be. How many of you are taking somebody special in your life for granted? How many of you have been given a grape crusher? We don't realize that God wants to be in the midst of it. Starting the wedding, going through the marriage, And Jesus wants to be there. And it's not important so much what takes place unless Jesus is there in the midst of it. Lord, I just pray that each of us here today is going to allow your Spirit to speak to us about those people that you've put into our lives that are there for a reason, and they're there to cause us to pray and to open ourselves up to you and to befriend and care for and love. They may be called a husband or wife. It may be a child. It may be a mother, a sister, a brother. It may be a friend. It may be a co-worker. There's somebody in our life, Lord, that's you've placed there for a reason, and we're supposed to say, "Gosh, I love life because of all the dynamics." It's not that I love life except, it's I love life because you're there in every part of it. You overflow. You want to flow outside the bounds of just these certain little gatherings that are spots of refreshment. We're supposed to be able to say, "Lord, I see you everywhere. I see your wine is everywhere," because grapes have been crushed everywhere. And Lord, I give you praise and I give you glory, because that's what you desire, no matter what's going on in my life, to be able to see you, to say thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.